Hello and welcome to Future Imperfect. I'm your host, Admiral Phillips. Yes, different name on the show. And joining me on this endeavor into the Star Trek universe to converse on Star Trek Discovery is Mike Booth Ninja Powers from Altered Geek.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh boy, this should be fun.
Yes.
I don't really get a chance to talk Trek too much anymore with anybody, because all my friends that watch it, we don't really converse all that much, except for you, so this should be interesting.
Yes.
So obviously Discovery just wrapped.
Yep.
And I took the last 2 days and binged watched all 15 episodes.
Which probably makes it easier to stomach some of the things that happen between episodes.
I think so.
But it also, I think, kind of damages it because then you see all the problems when you watch it at once.
I'm interested to see what comes about, like where our two, because you watched it on a weekly basis.
Yep.
I did not.
Yep. I reviewed it weekly on this podcast. So that I could kind of jumpstart it again.
So like I wanted to watch it in a binge watch fashion because I know that there are several TV shows that I watch that I will only binge watch. And now I haven't never seen an episode of Discovery before now. I didn't know if that would be the case with this or not, but I made that my preferred viewing method for this series would be to binge watch it. So I don't know where you want to start.
Well, I kind of wanted to start in the fashion of, and I'm going to do another one of these with Birdman Dodd just because I want to see his comparison of it. And unfortunately, he hasn't finished watching the series because I would have liked to have had a conversation bouncing between the three of us. But he's still watching it. So taking it from... I guess we'll start off with like the aesthetics of it. What is your feel for this, for the fact that it's made in modern times and with like a film budget and at the same time trying to fit into the old continuity?
So honestly, I didn't have a whole lot of problems with the sets or the ships itself. Okay, so I like Star Trek. But my knowledge of Star Trek, I know all the key players, and I've seen all the movies, and I've watched. I know at one point I've seen all of the Next Generation. I've seen I think the first 3 seasons of Deep Space Nine. I've seen all of Voyager. I watched the first 2 seasons of Enterprise, and I made the decision when I finished Discovery that I was going to try to rewatch all of Enterprise next.
I will say Enterprise has its moments. DS9, if you're looking for a really well done serialized show, it starts kind of serializing itself after season 5.
See, Deep Space Nine, for some reason, when I think about it, because it's set on a space station, I liken it to this is gonna be really bad, and I don't know how. What people will think of this, but I always likened it to the Melrose Place of Star Trek.
Okay.
I have no basis for that other than it's set in one location.
And Voyager is lost.
Sure. So, that's one of the things that always kept me away is that it doesn't seem, I'm sure it's not the case. Like I said, I've only seen the first 3 seasons, and that was as they aired. So that was 93 to 96.
Yeah. Well, 93 to 99 or something.
Well, but I'm saying the 3 seasons I saw were 93 to 96. So I was a kid when I watched those,
mm-hmm.
So but what I remember is that it all takes place on, I know they do away missions and things like that, but
they do eventually get a starship.
See, and then I just feel like that changes the entire premise because that's the Defiant.
It's the Defiant, but they literally use it only for the Dominion War. There's still primarily it takes place on DS9.
So, but that having also said that, the one I have the least exposure to is the original series, which is what everything is either set before or after, right?
Yep.
And I have no having limited exposure to that. Like I know how those sets looked, obviously, because they were made in the '60s, but my real exposure to the original series stuff is kind of from the movies. So I'm used to
The bigger
the
budget.
ships, a bigger budget Enterprise, if you will. That's what I've always been, or bigger budget starships. That's what I've always been primarily exposed to. And I did like I liked everything about the look of Discovery except for the look of the ship itself. Like obviously after it wrapped, everyone started binge watching it, so my Twitter feed like blew up with a whole bunch of people that were watching it like along with me. And I think one of the funnier ones is that the Discovery looks like a novelty pizza cutter.
Well, you want to know what's funny about the Discovery?
Is it a pizza cutter?
No, it's a rejected by Gene Roddenberry design from the Star Trek Phase 2 that was supposed to replace the Enterprise in the 70s.
Well, it should have stayed that way.
It's literally where they grabbed it from, because I found a screenshot of it, of the promotional type thing that they were working on for it, and it was just it's the exact design.
I mean, for a starship, for like a Federation starship, I feel like it had this is weird, like too many moving parts, given
like
that the
little
saucer section spins.
the spinny saucer section, and
Yeah, like okay, so there was a thing that my dad told me once. You remember the pickup trucks that GM did for a little while in the late 2000s, where they had the rear wheels would also turn?
yeah.
Like my dad once said that all he saw was, dollar signs over those trucks when they drove down the road, because it's just one more thing that can go wrong.
Yep.
And
it
to
was.
make a spaceship where your saucer section spins or has external moving parts in general, I feel like that's just dumb. Like I think it was cool for like a ship like Voyager to have the nacelles that moved, but that was a much smaller ship. It had a function, and it was a much smaller vessel. I don't see there is no function for the spinning saucer section on the Discovery that I saw.
No, other than it looks cool factor.
And you only see it like
when
once.
it's doing the spore drive.
Well, okay. So you really only see it during that like once or twice, because after that they don't show it to you anymore. All they do is show you the Discovery doing a somersault.
Yep.
So, or a cartwheel. That'd be a cartwheel.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's when the saucer section does its little spinning thing.
Right, but you no longer see that. The emphasis is on it doing a cartwheel.
Yep.
And then it's just where it needs to be. So like, I don't know. It was cool, and I like that it matched like the budget of like the movies that I'm used to seeing. There still is that minor disconnect of stuff looking a little too new, but I feel like for something that's kind of that might be set before like the Kelvinverse stuff.
Well, see, the Kelvinverse stuff doesn't even
apply to this.
No, it's a totally different universe.
Aren't the events of the remake of Star Trek still after the events of Discovery?
Technically, no. Technically, Kirk got to be captain after being in Starfleet for 3 years in the Kelvin universe, so he almost got to be captain about like 8 years sooner. So like okay. Right now would be when Kirk would be captain in the Enterprise in the Kelvin universe, the 2256, okay. As opposed to 2265.
So I like the design of everything. I did find it interesting that it. I'm fairly certain that Adidas did all the costumes. You could tell by the sport look. Plus, there's one scene where the Doctor is wearing just a regular shirt, and it has the 3 Adidas stripes down the back of it.
That's funny.
And that kind of made me go, "Yep, I'm pretty sure Adidas made all of the uniforms in it, because everyone is wearing a tracksuit."
And they all say disco.
If you had put black Nike shoes on the bottom of these guys, they would be in that cult that killed themselves in the 90s. But that said, I liked it. I liked the look that they went for. I just didn't care for the look of the ship. Plus, am I mistaken? Because it's been a while since I've done a deep dive into Star Trek. The shuttle, the shuttles spoilers are okay for this, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, so the shuttlecraft that when they were in the Mirror universe, that's the same shuttlecraft that they have on the Enterprise D.
It's actually almost a borderline Enterprise D, Enterprise or like runabout. Like,
Right, but it's not the one that you would
no,
see
no,
in that time period.
nope, not at all.
So that threw me for a loop. I was like, that's out of place. It's stuff like that. Usually when they try to do these like period pieces in the Star Trek universe,
See, that
it's stuff like that snaps me out of it.
That was my and a lot of fans' issues with them going back to the past, was that they were going to rewrite a lot of history, or try to create things or modify things as they saw fit because they didn't see a reason to conform to canon. Granted, the historical factors of the series eventually line up with part of canon by the end of the season, which is why it's so sloppy by the end of the season. But the visuals, they just didn't care. They were just kind of like, oh, this looks cool, let's just change it. Even though there's no explanation for why everything looks as horrid, is particularly when it comes to the Klingons or like the designs of the Federation ships. When you compare Enterprise to the original series, and I'm not even talking about like the cheap, bright colored 60s, white and red and all that kind of stuff, as far as the aesthetics, because I realized that was like cardboard box budget, but they didn't even, like, some of the things, they didn't even make an attempt to make it even look like it fit in that universe. Supposedly with 10 years before Kirk.
Yeah, I for me, when it comes to the ship designs, the one I was most disappointed by was the Klingons.
That was
Like,
yeah.
none of their stuff was recognizable. None of it. And for a second, I thought that the Ship of the Dead might have been like a bigger, older version of a bird of prey,
like a Romulan ship or something.
it looks like a Klingon bird of prey. Like it looks like a much bigger, modified version of a Klingon bird of prey or bird of war. What is the Klingon?
Bird of prey.
Yeah, it looks like a bigger. It looks like, let's take a bigger bird of prey and blow it up and then cut the wings off of it, and that will be our Ship of the Dead.
Yep.
And sure, that's kind of what that was, but everything else that showed up, that might as well have been like generic sci-fi knockoff spaceship.
Well, they looked like the scimitar from Star Trek Nemesis. Like
I've seen that movie. I've seen that movie like once or twice because I can't stand that Riker flies the no, not Nemesis. Sorry. Nemesis is the good one.
No, Nemesis is the one where Data dies.
Well, but that isn't that one of the ones considered good?
No.
I thought it was.
No, the one that was considered good was First Contact with the Borg.
Right.
You might be thinking about the one where Riker flies the Enterprise E.
I know that one's not good. I don't think that one's good.
Insurrection's not good either.
Yeah.
It's a run-on TNG episode.
So,
but anyways, the scimitar, anyways, it's like a jagged looking, razor sharp vessel that has no recognition.
Okay.
And it dwarfs everything else. So like,
well, in a way, the enemy ships are kind of like the only Romulan ship that we ever saw in the Star Trek reboot, right? That looks like nothing.
Yep, and that's kind of like what we got here. Well, then that's the same thing that the scimitar kind of looked like.
Yeah, so I will say this: I think watching this, I was thinking of what my favorite Star Trek enemy is, and I always like the enemies that can overpower the Federation or that trouble the Federation the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, there are two things that do that. Right? There's the Borg,
which everyone has an issue with.
Right. And then my personal favorite is the crystalline entity.
Okay.
Like, So I've always kind of wanted like an origin story for the crystalline entity because it's just a crystal that's floating through space that wrecks everything that gets in its way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an episode in here where I literally thought they were going to do. I part of me was like, are they going to do an origin for the crystalline entity? And they didn't. That was kind of disappointing. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The Pavos.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that'd be so cool, and they didn't do it.
Maybe that is the origin for it later.
Sure, why not? But that, yeah, I didn't really. I kind of thought of like a couple different things when I was watching it. Is that it's, and I said this to you on Twitter that it's the season 1 at least, from what I saw, is a sampler pack of the greatest, like a sampler pack or a retelling of you, if you will, of the best Star Trek stories.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of they're missing a Tribble story.
Even though they had a Tribble in one of the episodes.
Tribble story. They did?
Yeah. It was on Lorca's desk.
Oh, I missed it.
When he was in there eating
his fortune cookies.
His fortune cookies and the pieces of Kelpian ganglia.
Okay.
Which nobody knew what it was until Emperor Giorgio was eating it.
So yeah, it was. I don't know. I liked it. I was pleasantly surprised, but I was trying to think of why people wouldn't like the show, and I kind of came to the conclusion that Star Trek has always been a product of of the time it was produced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each season has been and story for each version of Star Trek has always been a product of the time it was created in. And the great thing about the original series is that was put on the air back when there was all this optimism for the future, right?
Yeah.
And the Next Generation came after that. So it's how do you build on, how do you build on what, so you go for hyper optimism, if you will, with the Next Generation stuff.
And then you go to war and kind of downerism with DS9.
Right, but that's what people were. That again, product of their time. So you're getting so you get that with DS9, and then the Enterprise stuff. That I feel like Enterprise and Discovery kind of share the same burden because we're kind of in that same political hodgepodge we've been in for the last 20 years. Kinda.
Well, and it's kind of funny you say that because Voyager was on the air before Enterprise, and
it was really optimistic too.
It was optimistic, but it was about a bunch of people who were lost trying to find their way.
And working together. Yeah,
and working together to find their way. And then we got Enterprise, which was I don't know where we're going.
Well, it's not we don't know where we're going. Think about what was going on around that time. It's here's humans trying to learn how to work with other more advanced races when we've always thought that we were superior, right?
Yep.
And so that's and I feel like each show, the writing is instilled with what's actually going on in the world around it. So people cry that Discovery or whatever isn't Star Trek, but I feel like Star Trek, and I only had this thought after watching Discovery. I feel like Star Trek is just a product of whenever it was written. Obviously, if all this stuff was set after the events of Voyager and Next Generation and stuff like that, then sure, I could say this isn't Star Trek, right?
Mm-hmm.
But given that you're placing Discovery before space optimism was officially a thing, you really only have to go off of what we see, the beginnings of space travel ended up being and how we as a culture learn to interact, especially when there is no one Earth culture right now. So
true.
That's just a little aside because I don't like because I watch it and I go, this is Star Trek to me. This is what I've always seen Star Trek as in my head, and I go back and I try to watch the Next Generation stuff and I realize that because that's what I grew up on. But I realize how stiff it all is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get
And
that too.
it's nice to see something that's a little more dramatic. I will say I was a little bummed that each episode was still the length of a standard TV show versus like an hour or like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, I kind of was sad about that too, considering what a lot of Netflix original series are actually like the full hour.
Yeah, like Netflix has hour series or 30 minutes to an hour, and HBO does an hour. Even AMC for like The Walking Dead and stuff like that, they do hour-long episodes. It's like you made the decision to put this online, but you're still giving it the regular TV show runtime. Like give stuff a chance to breathe,
Hmm.
you know? Um,
Well, and it could have helped flesh out some of the things too, rather than because I did feel like some of the season was a little rushed. Like they were trying to get to this next point, trying to get to this next point, and there wasn't a lot of like explanation. And then some of the things that they had were plot devices that were easily figured out way earlier in the season.
See, I wonder how much. So I saw something similar happen with a TV show, another TV show that I really like, which is Legend of Korra, which is
Hmm.
the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay. Originally, it was supposed to come back and was only supposed to do one season. So the writers plotted out one season, and then Nickelodeon decided, oh, we want to do multiple seasons. So then it became, okay, how do we take what we've already written and twist this
More.
into an ongoing thing, right? So as a result, I feel like the first season of Legend of Korra is pretty weak. And then the subsequent ones, because they knew what they were getting into, they were much better. Okay. So I'm wondering how much of the downside of Discovery is not knowing what Discovery was going to be out the door.
Well, I think part of it was that, and part of it was that they weren't sure if it was going to make it to a second season.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, how much of it is like, do we like, okay, when you're writing a series, originally it was supposed to be an anthology series, right? So
Originally, when Brian Fuller created it, it was supposed to be an anthology where it kind of changed, kind of like American Horror Story every season.
right. So
However, when he left, those that were in power that took over changed all of it.
right. So if you go into starting production on a show, and it's supposed to be an anthology series, obviously you're working with a tight knit story, right? But if you're going to gut that premise, you all of a sudden have to take what was already laid down and you have to figure out plot threads to keep it going. And I feel like that's what we got. We got a mess of that stuff.
Which is why at the end of the season, like the last 20 minutes of the last episode, you have a bunch of stuff to connect it to a second season.
Which I don't really like. Maybe you can address this. What is the significance of that? Like, is that like an Enterprise that got lost, or is that like actually
Okay.
the Enterprise? Like, why
So
is that a
do,
big?
do
I'm
you
trying
know
to
what
figure
the
out why that's
premise
a big
is
deal.
of sorry, do you know what the premise is of them jumping 9 months into the future when they came back from the mirror universe?
I mean, I know.
They essentially what it did is it helped wipe out a lot of the more advanced ships and a lot of the a lot of Starfleet that was so large and built up and everything,
Right.
which
Okay.
kind of helps bring it back to that kind of narrowed, small exploration vision that's in the original series in a sense. And then they have these 12 Constitution class ships that were built, the Enterprise among them, as well as the Defiant, which they go to show that during Kirk's time during the Tholian Web got sucked into the past, which is on A Mirror Darkly on Enterprise. So it kind of explains what happens there. So you see the original Constitution class ship there. So that's all connected in a nice little circle of life there. I would have liked to have seen that show up in the Mirror Universe, but it didn't. But the Enterprise, what the significance of is this is the actual Enterprise. This is the the second commander, which the first one was Captain Robert April, the second one was Captain Christopher Pike, and then Kirk was, the third captain of the Enterprise.
Right.
And each time it's had a refit, and Kirk's had it under a couple of refits. And so this is during, I think, Pike's, middle of his, after the episode The Cage, the original pilot of the original series. So they gave the ship a lot of the aesthetics on the front side from the Cage Enterprise. And then on the rear side, they gave it a lot from the refitted, the motion picture version, if you look at it really carefully. So, like, theoretically, Spock is also on the Enterprise at this point, because he was serving under Pike as a lieutenant or a lieutenant commander or something at that point. So it is the Enterprise, and it is Captain Christopher Pike. It's just I don't know what they're doing with the distress signal. And
it didn't look like it was under distress.
It didn't look like it was under distress. Although I know that Captain Pike has something happen to him later on when he becomes Commodore. When he saves a space station, and he ends up getting like these extensive burns, which is why he ends up in this, beeping chair. So I'm not entirely sure where they're going with this, bringing the Enterprise in here. And I also found out how the uniforms changed. Apparently at Starfleet Command, when they had the award ceremony, some of the people were dressed in some of the original series uniforms from The Cage, which apparently those different uniforms that were in the original series, they figured out a way around that by saying that those were native uniform designs specifically for the Constitution class ships, and not for the rest of Starfleet. So they figured out a way around the uniform issue. But yeah, it is the Enterprise. It's for all intents and purposes, and they also outlawed the spore drive on the Discovery, so we shouldn't see that anymore.
Oh, thank God.
They said that until Starfleet can figure out a way to not have a biological component running the drive, they're not going to use it anymore.
That was so dumb. Every time I rolled my eyes.
I was like, MacGuffin, we can get out of here in, a nanosecond, and so like Stamets was like, I'm happy to go the old fashioned route, and which I thought was kind of nice that they were like, okay, this explains why the technology is not used. Starfleet outlawed it. Lorca was, mirror Lorca, so he didn't really care about regulations. And so it kind of made sense. And so now this is probably when Starfleet starts designing, the beginning of the design of the transwarp drive that goes into the Excelsior and Wrath of Khan, or Search for Spock. But yeah, I was quite happy to see that some of those loose ends were being tied up to fit with the original series. Although
everything can be, you can line everything up when you can hide it under everything's classified.
Yeah. Just like the Mirror Universe.
Yep.
We're never to speak of this again. And then, in Kirk, the same thing, we're never to speak of this again. It's classified, and then you get to DS9 and everybody knows about it. Even though, like, Picard's crew never made it there. Until the comics, anyway.
Wait,
Picard's crew never had the Mirror Universe. They had parallel universes. They never had the Mirror Universe.
So the
DS9 had multiple incursions
with the 3 nacelles.
That was not the Mirror Universe. The 3 nacelles was from All Good Things, and it was an alternate future that Q was showing Picard.
Okay.
So, and then there was multiple episodes where they had like parallels and Future Imperfect where they showed different versions of the timeline. So basically, it would be like looking at the comparison of the Prime timeline and the Kelvin timeline.
Okay.
So like that would be the difference there. Whereas the Enterprise D never made it to the Mirror Universe, whereas DS9 did and Voyager never did. And technically Enterprise didn't either, but they just had 2 episodes that were set solely in the Mirror Universe. So it's yeah.
That's part of the thing. That's one of the things that made me want to go. I want to watch Enterprise next. Was that connection? Like
with
I
the
want to
Defiant.
see. Yeah, I want to see that. But
Mirror Darkly, I will say, has nothing to do with the Enterprise crew, so you could actually theoretically go in and watch it, and it literally is like the start of the Terran universe version of Star Trek. And then you could watch, the Discovery stuff, and then you could watch the Mirror Mirror in the original series, and that's pretty much all you need to know for, like, as far as like the Defiant is concerned, because the Defiant's mentioned in all of that, and then watch the Tholian Web in after Mirror Mirror. But
I'll watch the whole thing because that's what I tend to do anyways. So, but yeah, like I said, I liked it, and it just made me think about why people don't like Star Trek, and it's just like I said, I think it's just because it's a product of its time, and this is we're in the time we're in now, so we're gonna get the Star Trek that is most relevant now. I will say I will say this. I've been wanting to ask you this. I was going to ask you on Twitter, then I thought I would wait to ask you when we record the podcast. But how long until you get your wife to try to cosplay as Tilly?
ha ha ha, she'll never do it.
So
I am trying to get a Starfleet uniform, but I got to sell a lot of my geeky materials to. I have a lot of figures and collectibles I'm trying to sell right now, so that
come on, she only needs an Adidas tracksuit.
Yeah, pretty much. One that's black and says disco on it.
It doesn't even have to say that. Just get a blue tracksuit.
That is funny.
So
just talk her into that next time she goes to get a workout outfit.
There you
go. So yeah, I mean, like, I didn't mind the series as a whole. Like, it started to grow on me the more I watched it. And I typically would go back and rewatch the episode again before I would record the podcast, so that I kind of had all my marbles about me. And then I would read a bunch of different reviews and a bunch of different commentaries and Twitter conversations, which there's a war going between various Twitter people, and I was among those against Discovery on a few key points, and the key points is they were trying to make it that the history and the aesthetics were two mutually different things, and I think that they still should coincide to some degree. Like, obviously the history aspect, the canon of it, is more important, but yeah, there's some people that are so rabid on it that they can't even get out of their own way. And I was kind of like on the fence of both from the get-go. I mean, I've disliked Discovery from the start, but then it's kind of grown on me as it's gone on, because I've kind of seen what's going to happen as I've watched more and kind of figured out how it fits. The one key thing that still drives me nuts is the design of the Klingons themselves. Like, why are they blue and look like freaky as heck instead of like any of the other
blue.
Klingons?
They're not all blue. Like, some of them have they're brown, they're blue, they're albino, they're all different colors.
And they had a few of those in like the other series too, not blue, but they had the albino one at one point. But what I'm trying to figure out, and somebody was like, oh, well, maybe they just shaved their head at that point. I'm like, no, it doesn't have to do with the shaving of the head. It has to do with that they look more creature-esque, like orcs, instead of like Klingons, is kind of what I was getting. And then somebody had a theory that because the augment virus in Enterprise, some of them that got infected with it, somebody was making this assumption that possibly that's what led to all these different weird looking Klingons, and maybe some of the original kinds are actually like in the far reaches of space, kind of waiting to come back and then kind of reintegrate.
So it took me by surprise. Well, obviously I'd seen production images and stuff like that, but so I shouldn't say it took me by surprise, but it was jarring to see them at first, but by the end of it, I didn't even think anything of it. But then I immediately started watching Enterprise, and the first episode has your traditional Klingon in it. And that was when it was really jarring for me. So my biggest complaint was just a I don't know what you want to call it. It has nothing to do with the timeline or the aesthetics or anything like that. It was the I cannot remember the actress's name, but it's the captain from the from the first 2 episodes.
The one that plays Giorgio?
Yes. I could not believe that Starfleet gave her command of the Discovery at the end of the 14th episode.
Oh, the Emperor?
Yes.
Yeah, I could not believe that either.
I was like, okay, now you've just completely, like, I was like, it's that moment where it's like, I'm buying all this, and then they take one step too far, and you're like, no. Like, that entire last episode, I was watching that going, I made it this far, now I just want to see the Enterprise show up. Like, I literally only watched the last episode to see the Enterprise show up, because I did not care about what they were trying to do, because I found it absurd that they would do that.
Well, they were like, it's a means to an end, we gotta,
Which, it's so... I don't know.
They kind of redeemed it by the end because Burnham, got reinstated, and she was like, "Hey, here's the detonator for you to control all of the Klingons." Not to say that you couldn't
it all wraps up nicely.
Yeah, not to say that they couldn't use the detonator to force them all to go back and attack Earth, but
or why didn't they use the Why didn't if Starfleet planned it? Why didn't they just keep the detonator to make them come to the table?
Yeah,
like so that plan, like the detonator plan didn't even bother me. It was just Emperor Giorgio being put back in charge of the Discovery.
Yeah, I
was just like, that is the most absurd thing I've seen in this entire film.
We had a Terran, outlaw as the captain once, and then we're gonna put another one in. Like, one we didn't know, one we just chose, And now they aren't even going to... And I think that one of the biggest slaps in the face is we aren't going to have Saru be captain. They're going to put somebody else in charge.
Well, I also couldn't...
From Vulcan.
Watch it be Spock.
It won't be. He is a lieutenant at this point.
You think that?
He only gets as high as commander with Kirk.
You think that?
In the original series. They said that they aren't going to have Spock. There's a lot of implications.
So, it was Giorgio, and then the spore drive just drove me mad.
Because we'll see Prime Lorca show up, even though he's supposedly got transported to the mirror universe.
I don't know. Like, in his I didn't pick up on his character until like right before the reveal was made. It was when they were going through the crew records for the mirror universe. That's when I kind of put it all together, what was going on. But I knew he was trying to get somewhere, but I didn't know like what exactly he was trying, or who he was, until that happened. But what I thought was interesting is I completely missed the twist about why Lorca was the bad guy in the mirror universe. Like, was he like just... Were there 3 factions in the mirror universe?
The mirror universe is fueled by basically killing your superior to become the superior.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, so did Lorca and Giorgio want the same thing in the mirror universe? Just one person wanted to be in power?
Pretty much.
Okay, so they both just wanted to be head of the Terran army.
Yep.
Okay. I think it would have been way more interesting if Lorca had been like the head of the rebels.
See, because I didn't see him as that despicable.
I didn't either, which is why I thought he was going to be like the leader of the rebels or something, or someone important to the rebel, And I thought that's where it was going, and then all of a sudden, no, he was the bad guy.
Yeah, I didn't even have a clue either, like why they didn't go that route.
That's what baffled me the most. It's like, okay, so now he's the bad guy, and I have no idea why he's the bad guy. It seems like he's been like at least I feel like he should have been a rebel. At
Well, because
at least.
he wasn't like terribly evil either. He was just kind of like he had a lot of dark shades in
He,
him. He really wasn't that much different than Cisco in
he was a
DS9.
product of his universe.
Yeah,
Like that's all it was. But he still could have like I guess I missed the whole transition where he just became the bad guy because they didn't want Giorgio to be the bad guy.
yeah. I guess I didn't really see that. Although it's funny that Giorgio ends up at the beginning of the series and the end of the series.
I hope she doesn't come back.
I hope not either.
Like that, the spore drive, Giorgio, all that stuff can just go out the window. I thought the Klingon stuff was going to be explained away by Vok. Was that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is where he just starts, doing the Klingon thing and mating with Klingons, and that's where the different Klingon comes from.
Yeah, I had that theory, or I had the other theory that Burnham was going to be partially responsible, but yeah, it didn't turn out that way. Although this is the start of that, their explanation of how some of the Klingons look like humans.
Okay.
Kind of like in the Trouble with Tribbles, they have Darren, who's this guy that's on Space Station K7, who's a
Yeah, he
Klingon
just looks
operative.
he just looks like the Mandarin from a Marvel comic, right?
Yeah, and they actually revisit that character in Deep Space Nine because they have Trials and Tribulations, where they go back in time to that very episode with the DS9 crew,
I remember that episode.
and I love that episode. But yeah, so they had that instance again where they kind of revisited it. But in in Enterprise, they have the augment virus, which when cured, they look like that too, without any like alterations. It's just an injection. So
Okay.
like I don't know why they had to go to this weird of a methodology to get them to look like this. Like I just it seemed a little bit excessive for
Probably
something
because
that
they wanted something different. I for one, I want more Romulans. I feel like they were setting up Romulans.
well, they may have been, but the thing is the Romulans were supposed to be a war before like the Klingons. Like nobody was supposed to have seen a Romulan face to face other than Kirk in over like 50 to 100 years.
Okay.
Like they see the ships, but like they haven't like actively had conflict.
Yeah.
But I would think that they would have made some kind of an appearance with the Klingons having taken over half the Alpha Quadrant or the Beta Quadrant.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I feel like the Romulans have always been my favorite. Like one of my favorite villains.
The
Again,
Klingons, I was at least more sympathetic and liked them more because they were honorable. The Romulans, I thought, were just like slimy and devious, and so like they did whatever they had to do.
See, I like the Romulans for the same reason I like the Borg and the crystalline entity. They are powerful, and everyone in the galaxy knows it.
Well, and it's not even just the Romulans; it's the Tel Shiar who were just like extreme dirtbags.
Yeah.
So
Plus, their bird of prey is really slick looking.
yeah, and they also like they're heavily involved. Like they're one of the main villains and reasons for certain alien races in Star Trek Online. Actually,
Aren't they featured pretty heavily in Enterprise later?
no, they've got the Nakul. And a lot of other created races that they made up
Okay.
because they have a lot of time travel aspects of stuff that they're trying to preserve for the 28th century type thing.
Okay.
There's a big temporal Cold War, which you actually get to fight in Star Trek Online.
The Temporal Code War is part of Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which creates the character Daniels, which is really cool because he's kind of your guide through Star Trek Online when you have any temporal related material. So
Okay.
it's kind of that's the thing I love about Star Trek Online is a lot of the continuity from Star Trek, all of the series is tied in through that. Plus they add to it and fill in a lot of the gaps through that series. So
I will say I'm interested to see what season 2 brings. I hope they're able to nail things down, and it was nice. It is from what I can recall, anyways. It was nice to see Star Trek in a serialized form, like where it's one long story and not like Monster of the Week or Mission of the Week. Um, I'll say that. So I'm interested to see more. It's just there are things I didn't like, but it seems like a lot of the stuff that I didn't like won't be coming back for the second season. So
Yeah, it sounds like that too. They also there's thoughts that they may have that people are throwing out there of who should be Captain Pike should they actually show him.
I think it should be the guy that got in the movie.
Well, they said if
Bruce,
they can,
was it Green?
yeah, Bruce Greenwood.
Yeah.
The only thing is the movie ones, like because Paramount and CBS, which apparently used to be all one company under Viacom, like 2 decades ago,
Yeah.
before they had some massive split for whatever reason. There's talks that CBS and Paramount may end up again under Viacom, which would mean that they could kind of build under the same universe and use the films and the same play in the prime timeline, which I guess is why Star Trek films since Nemesis weren't allowed to play in the prime timeline, which is why we got the Kelvin timeline.
Now is Kelvin named after J.J. Abrams, like dad or grandfather or something?
No, the Kelvin is the ship that was destroyed at the very beginning of the.
Which is named after J.J. Abrams, a family member of J.J. Abrams.
I have no idea.
I think it's either his dad or his grandpa. I just saw that fact.
But
yeah.
Yeah, I know that
would make sense.
Anyways, I think that's why it's attributed to that, because it starts with the destruction of the Kelvin, which had Kirk's dad on it, and everything spiraled from there. But and I think that's why there's been such polar differences between the films and the TV. But if they get Bruce Greenwood, it would be great. If they don't, there were thoughts that the people that should play Captain Pike should be whoever that guy is from Tom Welling. Somebody posted like a shot of Tom Welling, who kind of looks like Jeffrey Hunter from the original pilot of Star Trek.
I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've heard his name outside of context of Smallville. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was the same guy.
And then somebody else posted who was that guy's name? They can't remember the guy's name. He's Tyler something from. He plays Superman in Supergirl.
Okay, that's really interesting, because I was just gonna say, do you think they're gonna have a Superman Supergirl problem here, like with Discovery season 2?
How so?
Okay, so Supergirl obviously established that Superman is a person, and they actually put an actor in the role of Superman. Okay. We've seen Superman. Now, we've seen the Enterprise in Discovery. Like, do you think that, like, skews things? Do you think that hurts things? Because, like, I know that I'll watch an episode of Supergirl, and I'll think, I think Superman should show up right about now. Obviously, you can keep going forward with the Discovery because, the Enterprise has its own thing going on. But I feel like the minute you cast something or you put like a face on something, especially that iconic, you're going to go, when are we going to see it again? And it's going to be all about, when are we going to see it again?
Rumor mill has it from the producers that the Enterprise will be featured heavily in season 2, but it will not be the focal point. They're going to be very tied together in season 2. So my guess is that the Enterprise and the Discovery will be working together, and Pike will be making his appearance. And I'm guessing that they'll probably make his number 1, which had no official name in Star Trek canon, which was actually Gene Roddenberry's wife at the time, playing the first officer. And Spock was like second officer. So If they get Spock, they should get Zachary Quinto. But
that would be a get.
That would be they'd have to, because there's really nobody else that could do that, as far as I can tell.
That we've seen, right?
Yeah, that we've seen.
There's got to be. There's no one that we know of that could do it, but there's got to be someone out there that could do it.
But I would be, like I said, I would be happy if they got either the Smallville Tom Welling or Tyler Hoechlin Superman to play Captain Pike, because they both have that same kind of look in the face and appearance.
But it'll be interesting. Like I said, I just hope it's not but again, like the Spore Drive, I hope they don't rely too heavily on the Enterprise.
I think that there'll be some reliance on it. I don't think they're going to go as heavily on it as what we think.
I'm just saying, like that's my fear. I mean, Voyager, I feel like got around it because they were trapped in the Delta Quadrant. DS9 got around it because they're trapped. They're stuck on a spaceship. But even still, the Enterprise showed up every once in a while because it's a space station. It wasn't just once, was it? It wasn't just the opening.
It showed up a couple times, but it was more so like they were dropping somebody off, or it was just
it was
like
still there. It was still there.
Yeah, it was still there.
But
they had a lot of people coming.
But it also made sense for the Enterprise not to be there because it was a space station. It's a revolving door. So it's just like I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. I just hope it's not another Spore Drive situation or a Superman on Supergirl situation.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen on that, but it's going to be interesting anyway when season 2 comes around. I went from a huge skeptic and a hater of the show to someone who likes it but still a little skeptical.
Yeah.
So
I liked it. Like I said, the Giorgio and the Spore Drive, those things annoyed me, but everything else I really liked. And I feel like the Mirror Universe got the shaft in terms of like sets. Like it was very much like an afterthought for some reason. I feel like it became the Mirror Universe was almost as sparse as I remember the original series being.
Yeah, they kind of just covered the same areas that were already on the ships, and then that was kind of it.
Yeah, it was like, here's the throne room, and we're gonna use like just different shots of this same set for like a hallway, or or you're in the throne room again, or something. Just it. And you're only there for a few episodes, so I guess, and you're only on one ship, so I guess you don't have to flesh it out that much. But it felt very old school production value, rather than like the rest of the sets and everything.
Well, that's why it kind of made sense that they made everybody on the Discovery dress like they were in the Mirror Universe, because it made it that much easier that they didn't have to change their costume when they played the opposite character.
Yeah, true.
Other than Saru.
Is it weird that the first ship that came across them after they slipped over to the Mirror Universe didn't realize that their ship said USS Discovery?
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird that they didn't figure it out until after Lorca's like, we need to fit the part.
Well, no, like even the ship that scanned them, like, wouldn't they notice that the ship says USS Discovery and not ISS Discovery?
You would have thought so.
Also, here's another little plot hole that I picked up on. Maybe it's just from binge watching it straight through. They made such a big deal about not being able to change your quantum signature, right? Like I've got old Giorgio's badge from my universe. You can't change this signature. It can't be faked.
Yep.
Yet the first thing that they do after they've been scanned by the ship in the Mirror Universe is change their signature to match that of.
They changed their warp signature.
Is that what they did?
Yeah, which is a little bit different. Like, they can't change their individual quantum signatures, which is why when Lorca got transported to the Prime Universe and he was on the Baran, it was insinuated in like After Track that he blew it up on purpose because they detected his quantum signature was not of their actual captain.
Okay.
So he escaped, as the lone survivor, just like his story, but he actually blew up the whole ship.
Okay. So I guess I just missed the part where they said I felt like they changed it. They masked their. I didn't realize it was the warp signature. I thought they were changing the signature of the vessel, and I was like, you just said it can't be faked. Yet it's the first thing you did was to spoof the sensors.
Which they even kind of mentioned that fact in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the episode Parallels, where Worf ends up kind of traveling between different parallel universes, and he himself had different quantum signatures, and as did his shuttle, but everything else was of that native universe. So it was kind of interesting that they were like, yeah, you can't fake a quantum signature for, stuff or things and people. And I mean, warp signatures, I guess they could do it, but still.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting.
Plus,
So
how do you know what Discovery's warp signature is in that universe?
I have no idea.
Like that's
unless Lorca supplied it.
That's true.
Because he was kind of shady on it.
I don't know. There's just little things like that. Plus the whole being able to they don't know how to detect the cloaked Klingon vessels, which I totally get. Which, let's not forget here, now they know how to detect cloaked Klingon vessels. Doesn't that change everything?
Yeah, for all the future of Trek.
Yes.
Maybe it's this primitive version of the technology, because if you remember in the original series, the Klingons didn't cloak.
See, I vaguely remember that, but like I said, I have limited knowledge of the original TV show.
The Romulans, on the other hand,
could cloak,
and nobody could find them.
So
I think that the Klingons later steal Romulan technology, just like the Federation eventually does.
So that was really interesting to me. And then, of course, there was the Burnham and her boyfriend get transported on the ship of the dead, and they mask their signatures.
Yeah, they wear these patches that mask them to be Klingon signatures.
I'm like, you can do this and you're losing the war? Like, how does that make any sense? So it's just there are, but again, that's like dissecting it, right? That's taking out like a scalpel and dissecting every little episode,
which you could do easily, especially if you watched it week to week.
I think you can do that with any Trek show, though.
No, I totally. None of them are flawless.
So it's like, I think that if you're if you like Star Trek, like I think if you like the movies, the recent movies, you would like this show.
Now, what if you were a fan of the old Trek?
I liked it, and I was a fan of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. So, and I liked this. But like I said, like I keep saying, I feel like what people are getting mad about this not being their Trek is that Trek's just always been a product of the time. And we're trying to write about stuff that came before optimistic space travel, like using like today's outlook to the future.
Now, do you think that they should have gone with the era between, like, say, Star Trek 6, which is like, the Khitomer Accords, and like the Next Generation, where there was like a lot of Romulan conflict, instead of doing 10 years before Kirk? Because there's like 60 years of time that's not accounted for between then.
Well, my question is this: how many years are there from Enterprise to Discovery?
90, roughly.
And there was 100 years from First Contact to Enterprise.
Maybe 75, maybe 70.
I think it was 100. I just watched the first episode. I think it's 100. Because the admirals and everyone keep getting mad at the Vulcans, saying they've been patient for 100 years.
Oh yeah,
they've been waiting for 100 years to do the warp 4.5 or whatever. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like maybe they didn't have to put it so close to the original series timeline, given how much time there is. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a big gap between Enterprise and when the original series starts. So I feel like they could have done a show there and not have to worry about running into the Enterprise. But at the same time, I also feel like it would have been cool to see. I would have been more interested to see what comes after Voyager.
And see, that was kind of my point too. Is the other timeline I was thinking of besides between the 2290s and 2360 something.
Because I want to see more Sovereign class vehicles.
Yeah, I would. Well, they even have in the game they have Odyssey class, which is awesome.
Is that the one that's after Sovereign?
Yep,
Okay.
that's the Enterprise F.
Okay. I like the E. Like I would have liked to see more ships in that design frame. But that's me always wanting like the cool, sleek, futuristic look of everything. Which I remember when Enterprise was debuting, like that was a huge point of contention. It's like, how do you have this ultra sleek looking vessel, and then you go to the Enterprise, and they spun it as like the Sovereign class, because the NX has a lot in common with kind of a lot in common with the Sovereign class of ships in terms of design.
Yeah.
But they spun it at the time, which was the Federation revisited, like they went with a retro look, right? So they went back to they do what car companies do, which is let's go back and take the 1960s Camaro and we'll modify it so it looks like it's what it would look like in 2017.
Well,
it's kind of
the Sovereign class was basically the Excelsior class updated.
Right, but the design cues from it come from like the NX.
Yeah.
But in the convention of when things were actually released, the NX, just from a design, like a not in continuity, from a production standpoint, the look of the NX was based off of the look of the Sovereign class vehicles.
Yeah.
So, and they spun it, the way they spun that is they spun it in the opposite direction and just said the Sovereign class was based off of the NX. So, but like I said, like we also said earlier, everything in Star Trek can be brushed under the rug under the guise of top secret.
Yep, pretty much. Classified.
So it's like it happened, but it only happened to the people that were in this room.
We should have had a Section 31 show.
So
Secret Intelligence Group. So before we close this off, for those that don't know, myself, Mike the Birdman Dodd, and some of the Twig crew are starting our own chapter of Starfleet International. So anybody's interested in this, be sure to reach out to me so that we can build up our crew. It's basically so we can get our own, not only as a kind of our own chapter of Starfleet, but also so that we can kind of have kind of a community group and stuff for games and stuff for the podcast and stuff for just because like right now we have, I think, almost 5 people to start the shakedown cruise, which takes like 9 months or something to commission it. So I've already gotten all those steps started because it's infinitely faster than hearing back from some of the chapters that are here in Michigan. Because I've been a member for over a month and I've tried getting a hold of them, and then the most I get is we'll get back to you soon, blah 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 blah, and so I was a little peeved at that, so I was like, I'm just gonna start my own. So, and then I built a website for it, and I managed to lock myself out because I put a reCAPTCHA thing on it, and then removed the plugin that I did that with, and then I had to hack the database on my own site.
I hate that stuff.
I had to hack I put the reCAPTCHA on there because originally I was going to do a BuddyPress install. Which would have been like a forum and all that kind of stuff. And I asked them, I was like, so what do you want to do? Do you want like Facebook group or do you want, BuddyPress forum? And they're like, Facebook's easier. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And it's a lot less work. So I removed it and then I forgot to disable it before I did that. So when I went to log in today, I was like, it's not working. Can't log in. The reCAPTCHA was broke. And so I hacked the database. I removed it. I removed all the Buddy Press stuff, and then the site wouldn't load at all. And then I did a repair and a couple of optimizations and then a couple of cleanups in the database, and then the site came back. And I was like, yay, it works. And I didn't have the CAPTCHA on there, so I'm not going to use it now. But it was a nightmare. So, but yeah, so if anybody's interested in joining up with us, it's a lot of the This Week in Geek crew and myself and whomever wants to join. I mean, it's Starfleet's like $5 a year, literally, to join. So if you're interested, just hit me up. That's all I got to say on it. And let us know in the comments what you think about what's coming up on Season 2. Or possibilities of things to come up in Season 2. What you hope that there is and hope that there isn't. So.
I want Netflix to pick it up. I don't want any of this CBS All Access business.
I hate CBS All Access.
I want this on... Do they... Okay, answer me this. Do they play ads?
On CBS All Access?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Like when you're watching the show, are they actually playing ads in it?
I can't remember.
Because if they're playing, first of all, they have to be playing ads because they do the stupid commercial break, fade out, cliffhanger, BS. Like
yeah, they do because you have to pay extra for the non-ads.
I really want Trek on Netflix and not on a commercial run platform.
Well, funny enough, Netflix actually footed the bill for first season. Right.
And they have the distribution rights outside the US, but that's still a 45-minute show with commercial breaks. Like this type of Trek, especially if it's never going to be on TV, this type of Trek needs to be an hour-long format.
And I agree.
So
yeah, that's kind of my thought on it too. I would much prefer them to have a hour-long show instead of 45 minutes or 39 minutes in some episodes cases. So yeah, you can get a hold of me on Twitter at SCP21 and yourself, sir.
I am at BoothandJ81.
So until next time, engage.